All right. Good evening. Hope all is well with everybody as well as it can be. And in order to move ahead in this class, I want to do a little going backwards. I want to go back just a little bit, review where we're at, and set the stage, so to speak. A few weeks back, we started after having finished the um, Sfaradi world. We went into the Ashkenazi world, and we discussed these people: Nor Hagola, Rabbi Natan, Rabbi Shimon Shlomo ben Yitzchak, of course, it's Rashi, Rashbam, his grandson, Rabbi Tam, his grandson, the Balei Tosafot, which is the time period of his grandson, the great grandson Zahodan, Rabbi Meir Württemberg, the Rosh we spoke about, and Rabbeinu Asher, Yaakov ben Asher, the Bal HaTurim, which we're going to pick up with a little bit more tonight, which was the first real codification of halacha. The one person we did not and will not talk about for a while is the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe, or Israel, sorry, I made a mistake. This isn't the man I meant to have on the screen. I wanted Rabbi Moshe Isserus, which is the Ramah, which I'm not going to talk about directly yet. We're going to only talk about him in a roundabout way when we talk about um, Rabbi Yosef Karo. We're going to go back to the Sfaradi world because we said we can't really understand Rabbi Yosef Karo until we understood the expulsions of the Jews from England and the expulsion of the Jews from Spain. And we're going to see why in a minute. But let's just do a little teeny review here that one of the people, the last person we spoke about in any depth was the Bal HaTurim. We talked about the fact that he separated his area of halacha into four main sections. I'm not going to reread. We already talked about this, but four main sections. And we took a look also at that time at the beginning of the tour. Let's move this over here. We noted that this is the beginning of the tour. The middle of the page is what he wrote. And there's commentaries on the side. Here's one commentary, here's another commentary. The one on the left is called the Bayit Chadash, or the Bach. We're not going to discuss him. We will hopefully one day, but he's not in the picture now at all. But there's this other commentary here on the right side that I briefly mentioned, the Beit Yosef. The Beit Yosef was written as a very long commentary on the tour. And we're going to see in a few minutes what it is the Beit Yosef did in order to write this commentary, how he came to do this. But the Beit Yosef was authored by a man named Rabbi Yosef Karo. Now, for right now, all you need to know is that he wrote a very, very extensive, long commentary on the tour. Okay, so the tour is the main main text here, and over here we're talking about the Beit Yosef's commentary. So we're going to put that aside for right now. We're not going to talk about the commentary or what he wrote just yet. We're going to first focus on a little bit of history and background of who he was. He had multiple titles. He's known as, by his name, Rabbi Yosef Karo. He's known as the Mechaber. Mechaber means the author. Lahavdil, 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 lahavdil. When you, dating myself, when you hear the name Cher, or you hear, I don't know, some other actor, but it goes by just, you know the name. Let's do a Jewish world. When you hear the Rebbe, okay, if you're in the United States, you're talking about basically the Rebavitcher Rebbe in most of the world. If you hear the word the Rav in the United States, you're talking about Rabbi Yosef Dov HaLevi Soloveitchik Zatzal. Certain people, and you talk about the Chavetz Chaim, it's Yisrael Meir HaKohen from Radin, died in 1933. So certain people get a title either from their book, Chavetz Chaim, that wasn't his name, that was the name of his book. There's people refer to Rav Neuver Zatzal as the Shmir Shabbos Gehilchasa. And again, by the name of his book. So the Beit Yosef was just known as the Mechaber, the author. Why is that? It's kind of weird, don't you think? I mean, I wrote a book, he wrote a book, so it makes me a Mechaber too. What's the difference? It's like asking what's the difference between the sun and a stone. So we'll see how he got that title and why. He's also known as Maran, Mem Resh Nun Sofit, which means our teacher or our Rav. He's also referred to as Maram. their rabbi or their teacher. All these titles. Okay. He's also known as the Shulchan Aruch, the set table. And now most of us come across that for the first time when you hear it is a different pronunciation. The Shulchan Orech. Shulchan Orech is, of course, the step in the Haggadah, which everyone likes to go to, which is, of course, the when we eat. So what are all these titles? Who is this man? Let's start at the very end for a second. The very end is that he is the foundation for modern, when I say modern, I'm talking the last 500 years of Jewish law and Jewish practice, the absolute foundation stone of Jewish law. It's a big statement. Oh, what about Pninei Halacha Berav Malamed today? What about the commentary of the Mishnah Brura? All good questions, all good comments and points. You don't get to any of those until you start with the beginning. That's like if I say to you that 2 plus 2 is 4, and you say, well, what about calculus? You don't know that 2 times 2 is 4, and you don't know 2 times 3 is 6. Forget calculus. We have to first understand the building blocks. And that's what we're going to do. We understand the building blocks of halacha, but we're not going to go through it straight through. It's going to be over the course of time. But right now, I'm going to start with the first building block, and that is the man known as Rabbi Yosef Karo. So let's just talk a little bit about his life. Let me just move you over here so I can look at you all. He's born in 1488 in Toledo, Spain. Now, if you remember anything from the last couple of weeks, you already know he's being born. He's born into a time period in a place in the world that's tumultuous. This is only a short period of time. This is only, remember, he's born in 1488, and in 1492 is when the Jews get kicked out. So he's only 4 years old when he gets kicked out of Spain. Now you say, okay, he was a kid. He doesn't necessarily remember anything. Picture a child, grandchild, great-grandchild you might have, and picture them at 4 years old, 5 years old. And the impressions that they get, my earliest memories are 5 years old. I have maybe 1 or 2 that I think I have from when I was younger than that, maybe. But he was an impressionable kid. And we will learn he had an incredible mind. So the imprint that's being made on him, while he's even just younger than that, the edict, in the edict we talked about last week by Ferdinand and Isabella, who, remember, they joined forces and create what we know today as modern-day Spain. The edict of expulsion comes out when he's young, as a kid, and his family runs away to Portugal. That's not that far where he had to go. But eventually there are problems in Portugal, which we didn't discuss last time, which is not important at the moment. But when he's in Portugal, the family, again, he's a kid, faces other trials and tribulations, let's say, further expulsions and further persecutions. And eventually they settle in the Ottoman Empire. In this particular case, he settles in a city. Today, I don't know how you pronounce it. Edirne, Edirne, maybe, Edirne, Turkey. So I'm going to show you what we're talking about. Here. Nope. Yes, here. Let's make this a little bigger also. He is born here in Spain, right over here. They run to Portugal over here for a period of time until once again, they have all kinds of problems. And now they're forced to go out. I don't know exactly which route they take. They went through, more than likely went through here, but I have no idea. I didn't look. I just drew a line. They end up in this city here, Edirne, in Turkey. So he's now in Turkey under the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans were the Turks. They had a huge empire, which included, of course, Israel. We know that. It was the Ottoman Empire. And so this is his route, unless you're from a different speaking country that's route. So he goes from Spain to Portugal and then eventually to Turkey. So the story with him picks up here until he goes to Israel, and he goes to Tzfat, which we'll see in a little bit when we get to that part of the story. So he has his family ends up there, and at the very young age, he's already being described as a brilliant Torah scholar. Now, over the years, you've heard either from me or other people saying, "Oh, at a young age, they were seeing some brilliant genius." Okay, come on, really, what does that even mean? So I've told you before in this class and in other classes that I have personally known a couple of people, and one only by reputation, who at the age of 13 knew the entire Talmud by heart. Photographic memory, probably an eidetic memory, which is even stronger, which means he actually can remember more than just the text, remember the situation he was in. So this kid that I knew of who was 13 or 14, that's at least 10, 12 years ago. So he's in his 20s now, at least. But it's possible. Some people just have an unbelievable. It's one thing to have the memory. I could say to you, I can memorize, 300 paragraphs of a book or whatever, making it up. I can't. The fact I know it in my head doesn't mean it. It doesn't mean I'm smart. It just means I have the picture in my head. If the question is now, can you put it into practice? That's the difference between learning medicine or law or halacha in the book, and then actually practicing and trying and learning by trial and error what really works. So he had the distinction already at a young age of being a tremendous ilui, and ilui means a genius, a brilliant Torah scholar who studied intensely, that at a very young age he was able to master at that time what was considered, what we would use the expression, kol haTorah kula, all the known Torah. Now, what does that mean? I'm going to put it more in modern terms. We know that a couple of years ago, it's more than that, I guess now, that Rav Kanievsky passed away. Here is a man who on Erev Pesach made a siyum, like many people do, make a siyum Erev Pesach so that the Bechor doesn't have to fast. But what was his siyum on? It wasn't on a Gemara. It wasn't on a set of Mishnah. He finished in the course of 1 year. And if you don't know what all these things are, it's okay. Just trust me, it's a tremendous amount. All of the Talmud Bavli, all Talmud Yerushalmi, the entire Shulchan Aruch, the entire Torah, all of Midrash, Sifra, Sifri, what else? Like some people, if they lived 30 lifetimes, wouldn't be able to do that, just turning all the pages and reading all the words. And yet he did this once a year to go through the entire, the corpus of all of Torah. Okay, given the fact is that he started his day at 2 a.m. and ended it at 10 or 11 p.m. the next night. And all he did was learn, except when he was talking to people. But the mind that he had, the brilliance, the ability to answer thousands and thousands and thousands of questions, is very, very brief in his answers. I had years ago, I bought one of his svarim. I like Shelot and Shubot. We talked about this, the books of responsa. And I was a little disappointed. I opened it up, and all these questions I get, the answers are Ken, Lo, C, question number 33. That's who he was. He just as minimal amount of words he could use so he can get back to his learning. So in a sense, this is what Rabbi Yosef Karo was like at that age. In his 20s already, as an already recognized exceptional halachic authority. And we'll see. I want to show you one more slide before I continue by what does that mean to be a halachic authority at that time. Remember, we're talking about a time period of history where halacha is in what's the word I'm going to look for? I think I put it on here. Just make it smaller. Evolution. The evolution of halacha. Let's go back and do just a tiny review before we move forward. We got, remember, Torah Sheba'al Peh, Torah Shebichtav, the written law and the oral law given to us on Har Sinai. The first time anything of the oral law, we talked about this a long time ago, is written down by Yehuda Nasi about 2,000 years ago. He writes the Mishnah. Not till about 1,000 years later comes along the Rambam, again, whom we spoke about. He writes the Mishnah Torah. The Rif and the Rosh would make a compilation of halachot based on the Gemara. After the Gemara had a discussion, they would have their own commentary as to what the halacha is. But again, it wasn't set up in such a way that you could look up, as they say, chapter and verse. Until we talk about last couple of weeks, the Tur, who made a very organized layout of halacha, the 4 columns, which becomes the precursor to the Shulchan Aruch, written by Rabbi Yosef Karo. This is where we're at now. Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Beit Yosef, Shulchan Aruch, all the names I told you before. So when he is known, stop share. Thank you. When he is known as this halachicist, there's actually such a word, then it's it means that he knows all the Gemara, the Talmud, he knows all the Mishnah, he knows the Torah Shabbat Peh, he knows all the things that came before him, the Rif and the Rambam, and all that stuff. And by the way, the list of things that I don't remember if I mentioned about Kanievsky, also went through the entire Rambam. So in his 20s, he already is this recognized authority. And in 1536, again, I'm just throwing in these dates, he moves to Bulgaria and he writes his famous work, the Beit Yosef. Again, the Beit Yosef was a commentary on the Torah. The Torah would give information. For example, he would say there's the Hilchot Melicha. Let me see if I can actually pull that up here. I think I have a link here for it. My notes. Maybe not. Or maybe taking it out. Okay, whatever. Let's say Hilchot Melicha, that before meat, after meat is shechted, one of the steps that's done is it's salted. And the Torah will make a comment that you have to wash meat before you have to do melicha, you have to do salt. And then the Beit Yosef starts also mentioning about the fact that it has to be washed, and he gives reasons behind it and all, and he brings in sources from all over the place and other works. His commentary is analyzed all the legal opinions. So, for example, the Torah mentions X. So, as a comment on the side, the Beit Yosef may go on and on and on and on, sometimes for a very long time. Well, the Rif wrote this, and the Rush wrote this, and the Rambam wrote this, and he gives you all the legal background and halachic background to the one or two lines maybe that the Torah wrote. His method, the Beit Yosef's method, was revolutionary because he examined the conflict. He didn't just report. Let's say, for example, you look in a Mishnah, it'll say Beit Shammai says this, and Beit Hillel says this. Rabbi Yehuda says this, and Rabbi Yochanan says this. Rabbi Elazar says this, and Rabbi Akiva said that. That's fine. That's how it was written. But there's no explanation, no background. Why did they hold that? And sometimes you'll find the explanations in the Gemara. But this is the first time in a halachic framework that all the different halachic opinions are then used to discuss back and forth the background to all of their opinions. And he would weigh the different halachic authorities, which he felt had more authority in this area, which he had more in that area. He also incorporated a lot of different sources. But basically, he created, as a framework around the Torah, was an encyclopedia of an authoritative guide to Jewish law. Now, imagine you have an encyclopedia, but it doesn't have headings. In other words, you don't say, you want to know what does it mean, rebit. Rebit is the Jewish, is the halacha of the usury or interest. You're not allowed to charge interest. So you want to look up something about rebit, but there's nowhere to look that says, okay, now I'm going to talk about rebit. So all his commentary are connected to the sections that Rabbi Yosef, that the Torah wrote, but it's hard to go in through it and start slogging through it all and see what does he come, what's his conclusion, what's the reason. So now what happens is now he moves finally to his eventual main home, and that's Tzfat. He moves to Tzfat in the early 1500s, 1536 to be exact, coming up on less than 500 years since then, of course, but a little bit less. He moves to Tzfat, which is, again, it's also part of the Ottoman Empire, and it also has another draw. It's not just it's in Israel. Why did he end up in Yerushalayim? Different reasons for that. But one of the draws for Tzfat was, and still is to this day, was a major center of not only Torah learning and Jewish learning, but mysticism. It attracted such greats as the Ari, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, the Arizal, Moshe Cordovero, the Ramak, his main student. These are names we're going to learn more about as we talk about the time period of the Ari. So he was the author of the Shulchan Aruch, which we haven't got to yet, but he's the Beit Yosef, is this man we're talking about, was a contemporary of the Arizal. I think they died a year apart or something like that. I don't remember. And what happens in Tzfat? Rabbi Yosef Karo becomes the head of the Beit Din, of the rabbinic court in Tzfat, and becomes the recognized halachic authority of his generation. Oh, wait, what about the Arizal? What about Ramak? Rabbi Moshe Cordovero? No. The Arizal wasn't a halachicist. He wasn't someone who was sitting and writing halacha. He was a mystic. It was a different world completely. He was involved in halacha and other things. We have rules that came from him. But as far as writing halacha, teaching halacha, spreading the word of Torah in such a way of halacha, it became that Rabbi Yosef Karo became the halachic authority of his generation. For those of us who were fortunate enough to live the time with Rabbi Moshe Feinstein Zatzal, I think it was 1986 when he passed away, we can understand what that means to a degree, to be the halachic authority. There is no one person that everyone looks at today and says, oh, that's the Gedol Hador, that's the greatest halachic authority today. Because unfortunately, we're in a time period where not everyone seems to agree on very much when it comes to halachic authority. But go back into the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the world halachic authority didn't mean he was the only one, but he was the one that was most universally recognized as the halachic authority was Rav Moshe Feinstein. I have two, but I'm only going to tell one very, very short story. One story is a little bit longer. So I met Rav Moshe when I was 10 years old. He came to Chicago for I think it was one of the first Aguda conferences that was held in Chicago. He came to the airport, our school that I was learning in at the time. Everyone, all the schools went by bus, went to the airport. Obviously, it's before 9/11, way before 9/11. And you waited in the gate, and we all waited in the gate. He came off. We're all singing Or Zaruel at Sadiq, and he sat down. The man about 5 feet tall, was very short. He sat down, and we all walked by. The boys shook his hand, said Shalom Aleichem. The girls just did a little bow and kept walking. I stood in front of him maybe 6 seconds, maybe. I can tell you, I can still see his face, that you could literally see his face radiate. You understood, even as a kid, you were standing in front of absolute perfect greatness. I will never forget that moment. There's one more I'll tell another time. It had to do with a dream. It's a little bit longer. So maybe if someone wants to remind me, I'll tell maybe next week, next time I give a class. But why am I mentioning that? Because in order to understand who Rabbi Yosef Karo was at his time, he was the Moshe Feinstein at the time. He was this person who was recognized as for that generation as the halachic final authority. Now, we're going to take a little side detour before we jump into the Shulchan Aruch that he wrote and what that really means and how does that connect to his commentary, the Bet Yosef, because he did another thing in a parallel track. And that parallel track was something to do with mysticism. I told you that he was drawn, one of the reasons he was drawn to Tzfat was because of mysticism, of the Arizal and other things. What I'm about to tell you is subject to debate. I am absolutely not authority to tell you if it's 100% true or not. My understanding is it has been proven to be accurate, but I would not bet my life on it. Let's just put it that way. Supposedly, he had, through mystical encounters, he entered into a certain mindset or a state of mind where he was visited by a Magid. Now, Magid nowadays means like a storyteller, someone who goes like Rabbi Pesach Kron Shlita. He's a Magid, and he'll go from one community to another and tell stories and parables and all. But in this case, it meant a divine or an angelic being that came to him, which revealed secrets of the Torah. That these secrets then were written down in a book that he wrote called Magid Meshari. And the text revealed his aspiration for perfect spiritual perfection or spiritual perfection. Now, I'm going to read to you. I'm just going to put it up on the screen so I can see it. Get it here. An English translation of the very beginning. Now, what was it he talked about for the most part with this angel? It had to do with the Mishnah. It had to do with the Mishnah. It had to do with how to conduct yourself in life and other things. This is the opening, if I'm not mistaken, is the beginning of the book. I'll read to you. I found a translation to English. And we'll talk about why it's controversial as whether he wrote it or not. He says as follows. This is what he wrote down in theory and supposedly that he heard from the Magid slash angelic being. Know that I am the Mishnah that speaks through your mouth. When you will be expert in the 6 orders of the Mishnah, you will be elevated to the highest levels. The conduits of true wisdom will be open before you, for I am the Mishnah, and within me is true wisdom, because I am the mother. Now, mother means Binah, which is a concept in Kabbalah, about whom the verse states the prophecy that his mother taught him. Therefore, take care from today not to let your mind wander from the Mishnah as you have done in the past. For although you occupy yourself with halachic decisions, which Rabbi Karo was a leading authority, he's talking in third person about himself too, which is a good thing. Nevertheless, studying Mishnah will raise you to a higher level. So grasp this and do not let go of the other, for together they are good. It's a quote from Kohelet. Take care that you do not fall into the category of those who forget even one thing of their studies, God forbid. That's the first thing he has in the book. Another thing on a more spiritual level says as follows. This is regarding the descent of the soul. Regarding the question you often asked, since the souls of the patriarchs, the Avot, come from beneath the throne of glory, Kisei HaKavod, why was it necessary for them to descend to this lowly world? Now, both answers that you usually give in response to this question are true. And then he goes on, he starts talking about that. So you get this feeling that this book, the Magid Meisharim, is like incredible and mystical and all kinds of great things. It was written, if he wrote it, which apparently he did, and we said he died in the 1500s, the book only is published in 1646 for the first time, 50 years after he started writing these things down. He's already passed away by this point. And part of this book also is about pushing him towards being more of an ascetic and more mystical. But the way it was originally published shows that he never really intended, if he wrote this, that he really never intended to have it published, because the way it was written was more in a collection of notes. Imagine you're listening to lectures, and you're taking notes. You're not writing the notes because you want to send out your notes necessarily, unless that you're working on a course or you're helping somebody. His son, Rabbi Yehuda Karo, doesn't even mention this book in his father's writing. There are questions of whether or not this actually occurred, that he had these encounters with this, in these mystical encounters. There are questions if he actually wrote this all together, and if not, maybe somebody else did. But it did show that he had, that whoever authored the book, and again, the reason they're saying it probably was him, is it showed an extreme close knowledge, firsthand knowledge of Rabbi Yosef Karo's public life and his private life. And the only way someone could have really known that was it was either him or someone within his family. Not everyone was convinced it was written by him. And actually, the funny thing, and it's funny, it was published in, like I said, in the 1600s, but in Poland, in Lublin, about 70 years after he died. And also one of the problems is, I mentioned to you that part of the book talks about asceticism, being an ascetic, A-S-C-E-T-I-C, that he actually is not in favor of that when you look in his writings in the Shulchan Aruch. It's not the way he's looking for life to be lived. And some say that the work is even disrespectful to Rabbi Yosef Karo. I have a note here that there's a scholar, Rabbi Louis Jacobs. He concluded the following. I'm going to just read you the quote. Followers of Haskalah, embarrassed that one of their heroes, with his keen logical mind, should have been kept a mystical diary, denied that Karo was the author of the Magid Meisharim, but its authenticity has been demonstrated beyond doubt. And this was by 1995, supposedly. This was already shown to be actually authored by him. So you say, well, wait a minute. What about the fact that he seems to have a different opinion in Magid Meisharim that he does in the Shulchan Aruch? Now, again, just take from me, just as, on my word, the Shulchan Aruch is the code of Jewish law. So how can it be? So there's a big difference. When you're talking about a book you're authoring about trying to get somebody into a level of mysticism, into a level of a higher consciousness, into a closer relationship with God, not a book of halacha, of you do this and you do this, and if you mess up, here's what you do, and here's how you're supposed to build this, and how you're supposed to do that. They're different worlds. They're different worlds, different audiences completely. That's like if someone asks me a question, two people ask me the exact same question, they may get two different answers. But the circumstances of the first person and circumstances of the second person might be different. But let's focus now for a little bit on the Shulchan Aruch. When you looked at when I showed you the slide of the tour, and I showed you on the side there was the commentary of the Bet Yosef, and I said it was very long. He understood that it would not serve the purpose in the long run of what he hoped for, which was that people could use his writings to come to halacha conclusions. They could actually see what the halacha was, because he eventually understood that people would have to slog through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of words and discussions and back and forth before they get to the actual halacha. So he had to do something about this. Parenthetically, I remember when I was learning for smicha to become a rabbi. So my teacher, my Rebbe, said to me, now the two main commentaries on one of the sections of Shulchan Aruch is called the Shach and the Taz. So he said, when someone calls you with a question, halacha question, they don't care what the Shach says. They don't care what the Taz says. They want to know what's the halacha. And the same thing is a similar idea here. The Beit Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, said to himself, it's too much. It's too big. It serves a purpose. But if you're looking for tachlis, like tell me what to do, it's too much. So he synthesizes it into a more concise, acceptable code of practical Jewish law, and he authors what becomes the Shulchan Aruch. Literally means the set table. Why does it get called that? Because if I want to know how to make a shofar, I want to know how to build a sukkah. I want to know, is a sukkah that's round, is it kosher? I want to know what happens if I forget to daven shacharit. If I want to know how to shecht an animal, I want to know how to put a mezuzah, what goes inside the mezuzah. Think about in the area of anything that has nothing to do with the Beit HaMikdash and any halacha that has to do with post Beit HaMikdash time period, it's in the Shulchan Aruch. And it's laid out literally by chapter and simanim and seifim, like they say that in English, like the chapter and the sub chapters. And there's lots and lots of commentaries, older commentaries and more current commentaries. But what he did do was imagine for a moment you walk into a study hall where they're studying for lahavdil, they're studying for their bar exam, a group of people studying for their bar exam. And they have piles and piles of notes and words and handwritten notes and typed up stuff, and they have thumb drives of all this information. And some brilliant person comes along and says, give me everything, takes everything, and says, okay, A, B, C, D, subchapter A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, D, by chapter, by every single step of the way. What you've done is you've now made it accessible for people to learn halakha. It was revolutionary. The only one who came close was the Rambam, who also set out much of this, but not in the same way, in a different way. And he did not, the Rambam's one regret, we talked about this when we talked about the Rambam's one regret was that he didn't mark in the Rambam what the sources were to every one of the halachot. You go in the Shulchan Aruch, you'll find on the commentaries, they say what it's from. Sometimes the Shulchan Aruch himself puts the little parentheses with the commentary where it was from. There's only one tiny problem with the Shulchan Aruch. I did find it. Let me just, hold on. Let's see if I can get this here on the screen. Yes. Okay, so let me screen share here just a second. Did realize I did have it. Okay, you'll notice that the way the Shulchan Aruch looks is very similar in style to the Torah. There's the center, which has the halacha, and you have commentaries on the side. There's a commentary called the Siftei Kohen, or the Shach, the Turei Zahav, or the Taz. And here you have the Shulchan Aruch. Who is the Shulchan Aruch? So if you look back at the tour, and you find the Beit Yosef commentary, it will go on and on and on and on and on, and he synthesizes it into the statement, for example, Sarich l'hadiach habasar kodem licha. That's this statement right here. which means that the meat has to be washed, rinsed before it is salted. That's the bottom line. He comes out with a very long comment and discussion on the Torah. And along come other commentaries and start to explain why. Okay, why is it the Shach gives a reason, the Taz gives a reason, the Beit Yosef in his original writing gives a reason. If you take a look over here, you'll see that the Taz, the Turei Zahav, comments the Beit Yosef, which means in the original writing, Rabbi Yosef wrote, Mevi bet ta'amim lahadacha rishona. He brings two reasons for the first rinsing of the meat prior to the salting. In other words, if you look back at the actual Beit Yosef, the long version, he'll have that you have to wash the meat beforehand. Here's one reason. Here's another reason. Here's who supports and all. Comes the actual Shulchan Aruch, he just says you have to wash the meat. That's all he tells us right here. Where am I? Over here. Right there. That's the one line. It leaves it to the commentaries who come after him to then say, oh, by the way, just you should know that the Beit Yosef had many more, the Beit Yosef, i.e., Rabbi Yosef Karo, who wrote all this in the middle, also had that. Just as an example, this section of the Shulchan, remember, there's 4 sections. This one's called Yoredea. Talked about that. Yoredea is what's called Isser V'Heter, which has to do with kosher, non-kosher, mixtures of meat and milk, mixtures of treif and non-kosher and kosher things. Hilchot Nida. And this one's about Hilchot Melicha. Sorry, been a long day. Hilchot Melicha, the laws of salt and meat. It's Siman Samach Tet, number 69, section 69. And then here you see this Aleph, it's subsection Aleph. What's all this other Alephs and all these things? They're references to other commentaries. We're not going to get into that right now. But the idea is that the Shulchan Aruch was user-friendly, but I started to say one little problem. And that little problem was that Rabbi Yosef Karo wrote this for Sfaradim, for Sephardi Jews. He was Sephardi. Of course he's going to write it like that. And then I claim that another man came along and did probably one of the greatest things for the Achdut of Am Yisrael, the unity of Am Yisrael. We're not going to talk about him now, but he needs to be mentioned now because we're going to get to him soon. And that is, his name is Rabbi Moshe Isserlich, the Ramah, Reish Mem Aleph. Ramah had a choice. He was the chief rabbi of Krakow. Sachakol, maybe they had 10,000 Jews at the time in Krakow. And he was their main halachic authority of the Ashkenazi world. He had a choice. He could write his own book, so there'd be 2 books, an Ashkenazi book and a Sephardi book, or he can use what the Sephardi Rav wrote, what Rav Yosef Karo wrote, and he can write what are called in English glosses, the Hagaot. He would add aval, but B'nai Ashkenaz minhag is, but rather the minhag of Ashkenaz is blah 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 blah. He had that choice. I'll give you one example: tefillin. When an Ashkenazi man puts on tefillin, he does it standing up, and he says a bracha on the shel yad and a bracha on shel rosh. When a Sephardi person, this was very hard for me at the beginning to get straight. When a Sephardi person puts on tefillin, you sit down for the shel yad with a bracha, and the shel rosh you put on without a bracha. The first few months, it goes back like 12 years now, but first few months I started to do it, in my head I kept saying no bracha, no bracha, no bracha, and I still make a bracha. Just I did it for so many years. But in any case, there's different approaches. With a bracha on both, standing up. One bracha for both, one sitting down, one standing up. So the Shulchan Aruch originally was written that you'd put on the tefillin sitting down for the shel yad, you make a bracha, you stand up, and you put on your shel rosh. Well, now when they get this book in Krakow, it doesn't meet their rules because the tradition in the Ashkenazi world was, as I said, 2 brachot, and you say them both while you're standing. So again, now the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserlich, is faced with this dilemma. What's he going to do? Is he going to write his own book, or is he going to write an addendum woven in to the book written already by the Rabbi Yosef Karo? And he chooses the latter. He chooses the idea that he's going to take the Shulchan Aruch and he's going to weave in additions. And we're going to take a look, not now, probably in a couple of weeks. We're going to learn a bit about his background. And then we're going to take a look at a couple of pages and see how that actually works. as far as the next week, I don't yet know. I have a kind of a crazy week coming up next week. I don't know what's going to be the scoop with any of my classes next week yet. So as they say, I'll keep those cards and letters coming. I'll send messages out. Probably won't be till day of any class, like my Monday night Tefillah class, my Tuesday night class, my Thursday morning class. Each one will be. I'll have to let you know pretty much when we get to that day to know if we're going to actually have the class. In the meantime, all should go well. Ezrat Hashem for all of us, for Am Yisrael, and Mini B'Sarot Tovot.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Be well.